Welcome back to the Hybrid Real Estate Professional Podcast. Today, I'm coming at you with a solo episode to talk about one of my biggest learning moments for 2024. I am your host, Aaron Amin. My wife and I built a portfolio of 8 cash flowing rental properties across 3 states, all while working full time and bringing 3 kids into this world. This shows a documentation of that journey and particularly how my experience can help you build your own life of abundance through real estate investing. All right, here we go. So I entered into one new partnership in 2024 for our first out-of-state flip in Illinois. This was with someone we knew very well for a couple years before that. We had done multiple transactions together. She represented us as an agent. She was our property manager for about a year, and we had sat down and had meals together. We were friendly, so a lot of kind of goodwill coming into this. Prior to this particular project, she had started and exited 18 flips successfully in this market with an average margin of about 30 to 50K in profit. So there wasn't that much meat on the bone in this market to begin with, but she had a proven track record for being able to have profitable flips. Now, the property we bought was actually a bit removed from the main part of town, which proved to be a much bigger challenge than we anticipated. This was a new area for her. The market we're in straddles the Illinois and Iowa border, and every single property she had done prior to this was in Iowa. So now that we were on the Illinois side of the border, there were some new complications and regulations and a few different things we had to learn and navigate that proved to be a little more complex than we initially thought. The area was also a bit more difficult to comp. So it was not only on the Illinois side of the border, but it was about 20, 30 minutes outside of town. All of our investing experience for our personal rentals and all of her flipping experience was on the Iowa side of the border. And then the last kind of big headwind going into it, it was a heavy rehab. So we had about $100,000 budgeted for rehab, which is quite a bit when you're talking about $130,000 purchase price. So we went under contract for this property in April of 2024 for $130,000. We bought this at a very discounted rate from an estate sale. Again, we had $100,000 set aside for a rehab budget, and our target sale price, so this is what when we talked about and looked at the beginning and decided to put an offer on this house, our target sale price was $300,000. We had planned for about a 6-month hold, and again, it was pretty much a full gut rehab. Now, a few things happened within that. So this is the first time we ever worked with a community bank. We have quite a few assets, a good amount of collateral. We look pretty good on a balance sheet, but we had to get to know and build a relationship with a brand new bank. And the banker that we worked with actually ended up getting fired about halfway through this project. But before he did, he managed to fumble our file around quite a bit. So we had an original target close date in April, but we didn't end up closing until towards the end of May. So that delayed closing for over a month set our timeline back for when we could start and then therefore when we could finish as well. So we already had a delay coming right out of the gate. There was a tornado that came through the property in July. You can't control things like that, but that was a pretty big surprise. Thankfully, it only caused a few $1,000s worth of damage, but it ended up being, we had a $5,000 deductible on our insurance policy, so it ended up being completely out of pocket, that expense, and caused a couple of trees to fall over, and it messed up some of the landscaping, but thankfully it didn't destroy the house, but still a big speed bump. So the overall timeline stretched on for about 2 months longer than what we initially thought. And the final sale date for this property and this flip was in November. The final sale price ended up being $260,000, which is $40,000 less than what we had originally anticipated. We had, during the time that it was listed, 25 showings, and we only got one single purchase agreement offer. We had a few people that expressed interest, but only one actual written offer. And then the final result, just so I don't bury the lead, is we exited this with $11,000 in profit on a 7-month hold. So by objective measures, it was not a failure. We made a profit. We made it out successfully. It was a really difficult year between the election, the high interest rates, and quite a few of the factors I described. However, what I wanted to share in this episode is more about what I learned from this experience. So a few kind of key themes here. Number one, we bet on our partner's track record more than the actual deal itself. So again, we had a great relationship, a lot of goodwill leading into this. And her track record was that she had exited 18 flips successfully and profitably in this area. we bet on that idea more than we did on the deal itself. This was on the Illinois side of the border. This was 25 minutes outside of town. It was in a completely different environment than where that success had originally occurred. So while we trusted our partner and we believed that she could pull it off, we put a little more stake in that than we would like to have in hindsight. And that proved to be a problem based on kind of the end result. We wouldn't have gotten into a 7-month hold deal for only $11,000 split in two. Nope, I don't think anybody would do that and take on that kind of risk. The second lesson is opportunity cost is actually a more important variable than what we had considered. So even though, again, we exited with a profit, the money that we had to risk and put out there was tied up for that entire 7 months. And as active as I am out there networking all the time, my wife's meeting new investors, I'm in different mastermind groups, I have the opportunity to invest passively in certain deals and even partner with different people. I had to say no to quite a few things during that 7-month stretch because our money was tied up and we didn't have anything else to contribute to those deals at that time. Without calling out specifics, suffice it to say there were many deals we passed on that could have had a much better return on our money than what this flip ended up having. So that's another consideration as we think about in the future whether we would tie up our money in something like a flip. Third lesson, the risk that you take on doesn't actually feel real until you're in the thick of it. So nobody enters a deal assuming things are going to go wrong. We like to think that we factor in all the risk, but in reality, we're thinking about the reward and we're thinking about the return that we believe we will get. We're not really thinking truly internally about what would happen if things go wrong. With 3 young kids under the age of 3 and all the various stress that was going on in our life, let me just tell you, it feels very different being a few months in and you got things like a tornado coming through and you see your profit margin start to erode. That's a whole different game when you start to actually imagine what it would be like to lose money. So imagine you tie up your money for 7 months and you end up losing and having to pay $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. That took us to a pretty dark spot in our head. So understanding and realizing that risk is a real thing, I think this is a lesson I will definitely take away. And then last major lesson here was the relationships with partners can be fragile. We had a great relationship heading into this. We carved out what we thought were great lanes. We felt very good about what we were doing heading into it. But 7 months is a long time, especially when you have a complex project with a big budget and a lot of things that can and some that did go wrong. We definitely had some dark moments and some times where there was some tension. And despite us all getting along and we're on the other side of this, we still have a good relationship. But I do think there are some scars and also a little bit of resentment on both sides that things didn't turn out a little bit better, even though I don't think it's any one individual's fault. So I always try and reserve judgment on projects like this for the very end, because if you had asked me at certain points during the project, it would have been a profanity-laced, stress-induced response. There were some dark moments that I'd really felt stressed out. Coming out on the other side, seeing that we turned a profit, at least we now have a bank of experience and lessons that we can keep with us for the rest of our lives. And I hope that anything I shared today could be valuable to you as you consider whether it makes sense to take on a riskier project like a flip versus what we normally talk about on this show, which is your kind of bread and butter, standard long-term rental single family. I'm still a believer that is the best wealth building tool that's accessible to all and can be taught and learned quickly how to go about. So hope you found some value. If you did, please remember to leave a 5-star rating and review. If you like this style of episode, let me know. I'm planning to do more of these kind of retrospective and reflections as 2025 goes on.